The north was cold, as always. Snow clung to the grey stones of Winterfell like a second skin, the wind howling like a restless ghost through the courtyards and towers. Lord Eddard Stark stood on the battlements alone, wrapped in his thick fur cloak, his eyes fixed on the white horizon. There was a silence in him that had nothing to do with the snow. It had been years since Robert sat the Iron Throne, years since the rebellion that ripped the realm apart, years since the Tower of Joy. And still that day haunted him. He remembered the screams, the blood, the sword fight beneath the dawn. But mostly he remembered her, Lyanna. People said she had been kidnapped, raped, defiled, a victim, a pawn, a princess in distress, but they were all wrong. Lyanna had gone with Rhaegar willingly, foolishly, believing in a dream that could never be real. She died for it. But what no one knew, what Ned had buried deeper than any Stark ever buried their dead, was the truth. She hadn't died alone, and neither had Rhaegar. In the soft warmth of bloodied sheets, Lyanna had whispered a secret into Ned's ear, a name, a plea, and a truth that would shake the realm to its core if it ever got out. That day Eddard Stark died, and something else was born in his place. A man of silence, sacrifice, and a terrible burning secret. But that wasn't the only truth that had been spoken in the Tower of Joy. He had thought he was just a brother, a second son, a Stark. He wasn't. In those final moments, Lyanna, delirious and dying, spoke of more than her child. She spoke of a letter, a document that Rhaegar had shown her, a sealed testament from the great Sept itself. "Father lied to us all," she had said with tears in her eyes. "You're not just my brother, you're not just Ned, you're his." At the time, he thought she meant Rhaegar, the panic in her voice, the blood loss. He thought she was rambling, but she wasn't. He found it years later, long after Robert had taken the throne, long after Jon had been brought to Winterfell under the lie of bastard shame. It was hidden among old scrolls sent from Dawn, buried under marriage contracts and Targaryen correspondences smuggled through the Red Mountains. The truth hit him like cold steel. Eddard Stark was not Rickard Stark's son. He had been born in the ashes of Summerhall. His real father was Aerys II, the Mad King. His mother, a Targaryen lady-in-waiting, had died in childbirth. The story was cleaned up, erased, passed off as a stillbirth. But someone had saved him, whisked him away to the Starks to be raised far from the chaos and bloodshed. Rickard Stark had raised him as a second son, told no one, and carried that lie to the grave. The Honourable Lord Stark was the last true dragon. He remembered staring at the paper for what felt like days. His hands had shaken. His breath came in short, quiet gasps. How could he ever tell anyone? Robert would kill him on the spot. Catelyn would never look at him. The same. His bannermen would call him false, traitor, abomination, Targaryen. And worst of all, what would Jon think? Ned kept it locked away, deep in the crypts, hidden behind the statue of Lyanna, guarded by cold stone and colder ghosts. He had lived every day since in fear, not for himself, but for the realm, for what that truth could unleash. But now, with whispers from the East of Dragons, flying once more, and word that Daenerys Targaryen was alive and moving through Slaver's Bay, the past was starting to breathe again, and Ned could feel it. The fire in his blood, the fire he had buried beneath snow and silence, was waking. It started in dreams. A red door, a woman's voice, the roar of a dragon. He had learned to live with guilt, with the lie. But he couldn't unlearn who he was, and he couldn't keep pretending forever, because secrets always come for their keepers, and winter was no longer the only thing coming. He hadn't slept through the night in weeks. Every time Ned closed his eyes, the same dream returned, an endless corridor of black stone, torches flickering along the walls, and at the end, a massive iron door. Behind it, he could hear something breathing, slow, deep, ancient. He would walk toward it, hand trembling as he reached for the handle, and then he'd wake up every single time. Ned Stark had always believed dreams were just echoes of the day, nothing more, but this wasn't that. This was something else, something calling him. He'd grown up fearing fire. The North taught you that. It made a man respect cold, honor stillness, trust in stone and snow. But now he could feel heat deep in his chest, pulsing like a second heart. He kept to himself more these days, even from Catelyn. She was kind, loyal in her own way, but she wouldn't understand. She still resented Jon, no matter what she said. She didn't know the truth. No one did. But that was starting to change. Maester Luwin had come to him earlier that week, parchment in hand, concern written across his brow. "A raven from White Harbor," Luwin said cautiously. "Reports of a red priest traveling the north, preaching fire, claiming the return of dragons." Ned had taken the scroll without a word, read it slowly, then read it again. The priest's name was Morin, a foreigner from Essos, clothed in flame-colored robes, speaking in tongues, drawing flames in the snow. But what disturbed Ned wasn't the priest. It was what he said. "The dragon of ice walks among you. He hides behind wolves, but he is fireborn, and when the time comes, he must choose. Burn the world or save it." It was too specific, too close. And then there was Jon. The boy was growing into a man faster than Ned expected, sharp, brooding, quiet, too much like himself. And now he'd taken to asking questions about his mother, about his blood, about why he felt so different. "You look at Robb like he's your son," Jon had said one night by the fire, voice low. "But you look at me like you're afraid I'll ask something you can't answer." Ned hadn't replied. He couldn't. But the time was slipping away from him. He thought he had more of it, that if he buried the truth long enough, it would die with him, that Robert would grow old and fat, and dragons would stay dead and the realm would forget. But dragons were returning, magic was stirring, and if Daenerys lived, if Viserys somehow clawed his way back into power, then the realm wouldn't be safe anymore, especially not for Jon. That night, Ned went down into the crypts again, past the statues of his family, past the cold air and heavy silence, down to the far end where Lyanna rested. He lit a single torch and knelt in front of her stone likeness. "I kept my promise," he whispered. "But I lied to everyone to do it, and now the lie has grown teeth." He pulled away a small stone slab behind her statue. Inside was a sealed chest, wrapped in oiled cloth, marked only with a single sigil, the three-headed dragon of House Targaryen. He opened it slowly. Inside was the letter, the document Lyanna spoke of, proof that Eddard Stark had not been born of Rickard, but of Aerys. It bore the Mad King's seal, his twisted signature. It also held something else, a dagger, not northern steel, not forged in Winterfell. This one was Valyrian, black as night and light as air, the hilt in the shape of a coiled dragon. Ned held it in his hands and felt a strange warmth run through his body. Aerys's blood. He could no longer deny it. The gods knew, the fire knew, and somewhere in the dark, the truth was waking with claws. Ned Stark had lived as a man of the North, but he was born in fire, and fire was rising. King's Landing was a furnace compared to Winterfell. The air was thick, sweaty, and sour with the stink of too many people and not enough honesty. Ned hated it. He rode through the Red Keep's gates with the same silent dread he'd felt 17 years ago during Robert's rebellion, when ashes still floated through the air and Targaryen bodies were stacked like cordwood. Only this time, He wasn't a victorious rebel returning as Warden of the North. He was a dragon walking into a den of lions. Robert greeted him like a brother, slapping his back, loud and drunk with nostalgia. They drank, they joked, they lied to themselves. But Ned could see the cracks in him now. Robert was a man rotting from the inside, too much wine, too much hate, and a throne that had turned his crown into a chain. "Ned," Robert slurred over roasted boar and wine, "I need you to help me rule. You're the only one I trust." But trust had limits, especially when the king had unknowingly murdered your family. Robert had always hated the Targaryens. That was no secret. He spoke of Rhaegar like the man had personally ruined his life. Never. Once admitting Lyanna had chosen him. Robert saw dragons as monsters. If he ever found out one had been sitting at his table for decades, he wouldn't hesitate to draw his warhammer, no matter who it was. And Ned wasn't the only one in this capital with secrets. Littlefinger had been watching him since his arrival, eyes like a snake in warm grass. That man trusted no one and knew too much. Petyr Baelish made it his job to collect whispers, and Ned could feel the weight of invisible ears every time he took a step. Then there was Varys. The spider hadn't said much when they met, but he'd looked at Ned with a strange kind of curiosity, not suspicion, recognition. "You remind me of someone I once knew," he had said with a faint smile. "Someone long forgotten." Ned didn't ask questions. He knew better. But what chilled him most wasn't Varys or Littlefinger or even Cersei's smug glances from across the court. It was the letter. A second raven had come from Castle Black. Benjen was missing, gone beyond the wall and not returned. And Jon had taken the black. Ned had always believed in the Night's Watch, duty, sacrifice, honor. But now he wondered, had he sent Jon into exile to protect him, or to avoid the truth? He thought of the boy's dark eyes, his haunted gaze. Jon was beginning to feel the pull too. Ned had seen it, the same fire in the blood, the same itch that couldn't be explained. And if he was Lyanna's son, if Rhaegar was his father, then he wasn't just a bastard. He was a prince, a Targaryen by birth, a Stark by protection. And if the realm ever discovered it, Ned closed the windows of his chambers that night and drew the dagger from its wrappings. The Valyrian steel shimmered faintly in the candlelight, the dragon hilt coiled tight in his palm like it knew him. He thought of burning cities, of mad kings and madder sons, of wildfire under the Red Keep and the silence of the crypts. He wasn't just protecting Jon anymore. He was protecting the realm from him, or maybe from what he might become. Later that night, a knock came at his chamber door. He expected a squire, maybe a raven. Instead, it was Varys. "My lord," the eunuch said softly, "we must speak. There are things stirring in the east and in the north." Ned narrowed his eyes. "Speak plainly." The spider gave a thin smile. "Let us not pretend. You are not only a Stark, Lord Eddard. You are something much more dangerous. And soon, others will know it too." The air seemed to vanish from the room. Varys leaned in just enough to whisper, "The dragons are coming back, my lord, and the game is about to begin." The silence in Ned's chambers after Varys left was louder than any battlefield. He stood alone, staring at the dying candlelight, his jaw clenched, the dagger still resting on the table, like it was daring him to remember who he truly was. Dangerous. That's what Varys called him? Not honorable, not loyal, not even Lord Dangerous. He'd lived half a life hiding from that truth, hiding behind the Stark name like armor, building a world made of quiet lies and buried blood. But now, the cracks were showing, and if the spider knew, it meant others soon would. And then he thought of Cersei. He didn't trust her. Not from the moment he saw her with her golden-haired children. Not when he noticed how none of them looked like Robert. Not even a trace. Bastards in the royal bed. Targaryens hiding in the north. The realm was built on lies, and now they were all about to be exposed at once. Ned wasn't a man made for court games. He hated whispers and riddles. He liked things to be simple: truth, honor, loyalty. But those things had no place in King's Landing. He went to Robert the next day, hoping he still had time, hoping his old friend still had enough of the man he once was to listen. But Robert was drunk again. Always drunk, rambling about old battles and younger women, slurring his hatred for dragons like it was a lullaby. "I should have killed the whole lot of 'em," he muttered into his wine. "Even the babes in the belly." Ned froze. He remembered the screams in the Red Keep after the sack, the blood, the smell of death that never left the halls. And now he was one of them. A babe that lived. A dragon that grew up in the snow. "You didn't," Ned said stiffly, "because you didn't know." Robert didn't notice, or maybe he didn't care, but Varys was right. Time was running out. That night, Ned penned a letter. He didn't trust the Ravens anymore, not with this, so he gave it to Jory Cassell, his most loyal man. "Ride for Winterfell," Ned told him. "Give this only to Maester Luwin, no one else." Jory looked him in the eye. "Is something wrong, my lord?" "Everything," Ned said quietly. "Everything I've built is about to burn." The letter was simple, but the meaning behind it could destroy kingdoms. "If I fall, tell Jon the truth. Tell him he is not a Snow, he is a Targaryen, and so am I." 2 days later, the whispers reached him. Baelish came first, smirking as always. "You've made quite the impression, Lord Stark. The Queen thinks you're digging too deep." "I'm trying to protect the realm," Ned replied, tired of the game. Littlefinger just smiled. "So was Rhaegar. Look how that ended." And then came the worst of it, Sansa. She was crying, her voice shaking, too young to understand what she was caught in. "The Queen says I can't marry Joffrey if you keep being difficult." Ned pulled her close, heart aching. "I'm doing this for you," he said, "for your sisters, for all of us." But Sansa didn't see that. She only saw a father ruining her fairy tale. Later that night, Ned stood alone in the godswood of the Red Keep, the Hearttree's red eyes watching him like they knew everything. He spoke aloud as he hadn't in years. "If I fall, let it be for something true." And in the distance, under the cover of shadow, someone listened. The city felt colder that morning, but it wasn't the weather. It was something else, a tension in the air, thick as a blade to the throat, the kind that tells you before the sword swings that it's already too late. Ned rose early. He hadn't slept again. The letter was gone. Jory had ridden out with it 2 nights ago. At least that piece was in place, but everything else was falling apart. Varys had vanished. Baelish was circling him like a wolf, pretending to be a friend. Cersei was silent, too silent. And Robert was dying. Ned had known the moment. The messenger burst into the hall, pale and shaking. A boar hunt gone wrong, they said. Gored through the belly. Too much wine, not enough sense. But Ned knew better. It wasn't just the boar. Cersei had made her move. He rushed to the king's chamber and found Robert barely breathing, his skin pale and wet with fever. The room stank of blood and sour milk. Maesters hovered, useless and whispering. Robert grabbed Ned's hand. His grip was weak, but his eyes still held a glint of fire. "Make sure Joffrey sits the throne," he rasped. "Promise me." Ned swallowed, hard. "You should rest, Robert." "I'm dying. I don't want rest. I want justice. Gods, Ned. I never wanted this damn throne." Ned nodded slowly. He took the quill and ink and drafted a will that would make the rightful heir rule until Joffrey came of age. But he didn't write Joffrey's name. He wrote, "My rightful heir." And Robert signed it. That was the last honest thing either of them ever did. Ned left the chamber with the will clutched in his hand and a storm rising in his gut. He knew what was coming. Cersei wouldn't let power slip away quietly. She had waited too long, schemed too deep. He gathered his men, Sir Barristan, trusted and loyal, Renly, younger and ambitious, and Baelish, because snakes sometimes needed watching up close. "I have the king's will," Ned said. "It names his heir. We must act before the queen does." Renly leaned in, excited. "Then strike now. Take the boy. End it before it begins." But Ned shook his head. There must be no blood. And that was his mistake. He underestimated Cersei Lannister. Again, the next day Robert was dead. And before the tears were even dry, Joffrey Baratheon sat on the Iron Throne. No council, no vote, no honor, just a boy with a crown and a mother with knives. Ned came to court with the king's will, handed it to Sir Barristan in front of the full court. He stood tall, voice steady, and spoke the truth. "Joffrey Baratheon is not Robert's son." Gasps, murmurs, whispers darting like rats. Cersei stepped forward slowly, her smile like poison. "Then who is?" she asked sweetly. Ned's voice rang like steel. "He is Jaime Lannister's bastard. All three of them are." Joffrey stood there, confused but defiant. "I'm the king. You are not," Ned said coldly. "The king's will names his rightful heir." Before he could finish, the gold cloaks drew swords. Littlefinger stepped out from behind the throne, smirking like a viper. "I did warn you not to trust me," he whispered. Then chaos, steel clashing, screams echoing through the hall. Blood splashing across the floor, Ned was seized, disarmed, forced to his knees, and from the crowd, Cersei watched with cold, unblinking eyes. As the guards held him, Ned realized something that nearly made him choke. He had made this mistake once. Before, he kept Jon's truth secret to protect him, and now, because of that silence, another bastard sat on the throne while the realm burned. The blood of the dragon had stayed quiet too long, and now it was screaming to be heard. The dungeons of the Red Keep were colder than Winterfell. Not in temperature, but in soul, Winterfell's crypts whispered with the voices of dead kin. These walls, they were just stone and rot, soaked with the cries of men who died screaming for mercy that never came. Ned sat on the floor, his wrists chafed from the iron shackles, the torchlight flickering above him like a candle over a grave. Every part of him ached, not from the beating, but from the betrayal. He had walked into the lion's den with truth, and all he got was chains. But maybe that's what he deserved. He had lied his whole life, for peace, for family, for the sake of a realm that didn't care for either. And what had it bought him? A bastard son on a frozen wall, hated by half his siblings, a king who drank himself into an early grave, and a realm about to fall into war again. He leaned his head back against the stone and exhaled slowly. "I should have told the truth if Lyanna died, but truth in those days would have meant death. For Jon, for himself, for the fragile peace built on Robert's rage. Still, it felt like cowardice now." The cell door creaked open, footsteps, slow and soft. Not a guard. Varys. He appeared like a shadow, gliding through the doorway as if the rats parted for him. "You look tired, Lord Stark." "I look like a fool," Ned muttered. Varys tilted his head, studying him. "You tried to play their game with honor. That's like bringing a candle to a wildfire." Ned didn't respond. "You're not just Lord Eddard anymore," Varys continued, voice low. "The rumors are spreading. Quiet, curious little whispers. A bastard in the north who favors no Stark, a wolf with dragon eyes, and you, brother to the man who ran off with Rhaegar's heart." Ned's eyes narrowed. "You know." Varys nodded. "I know enough. And yet, you do nothing. I do what I must to keep the realm from tearing itself apart." The eunuch knelt beside him, his voice suddenly sharper. "Tell me, Lord Stark, or should I say Prince Eddard, do you still believe silence will save your son?" That hit deeper than Ned expected, because he didn't know anymore. "Jon doesn't know who he is," Ned said quietly, "and if he did, it would destroy him. Or worse, it would make him believe he has a claim, doesn't he?" Ned looked. Away! I'm trying to keep him safe, he whispered. I thought hiding the fire in him would stop it from burning him alive. Varys leaned in. But you can't hide fire forever. Not with dragons in the sky again. And there it was. Daenerys. The tear girl in the east, last daughter of the dragon. Reports said she had survived the poison, survived exile, even walked through flames. Now she had hatched dragons from stone, actual dragons. The world was changing, and maybe Ned had to change with it. Your silence brought us here, Varys said. Now your voice might be the only thing that saves us. He stood. The queen wants your head. But the boy king is weak. He needs guidance. She thinks she can control him. But others are watching. Waiting. Who? Ned asked. Varys turned toward the door. People who remember the Targaryen name. Who see a storm coming, and who would rather follow a Stark with dragon's blood than a lion's bastard with madness in his veins. He paused before leaving. If I can keep you alive long enough, would you speak the truth? Not just for Jon, for all of it? Ned didn't answer at first. Then he looked up, eyes clear, voice firmer than it had been in weeks. If I live, then no more lies. Varys gave the faintest nod, then disappeared into the dark. Ned sat back, heart pounding. Because for the first time in his life, the truth wasn't just a burden, it was a weapon. The day of judgment came fast. Too fast. The guards came at dawn, heavy-footed and silent, and dragged Ned up the winding steps. His legs were weak from days in the dark, but his back stayed straight. The Red Keep was alive with noise above him, shouting, jeering, the anxious shiver of 1,000 eyes waiting to watch something bleed. They marched him through the throne room first. The Iron Throne loomed high and jagged, empty for now, but cold and waiting. Joffrey wasn't seated on it yet. He was at the Sept of Baelor. That's where it would happen. That's where they wanted him to die. As they reached the courtyard, the sun burst out from behind a cloud, bright and blinding. The Sept stood ahead, tall and full, bells already ringing, not in mourning, in celebration. Cersei stood on the steps, cloaked in red, face like marble. Beside her, Joffrey grinned with a boy's cruelty. Sansa wept nearby, trying not to break down completely. The crowd was restless, hungry for spectacle, and Ned was calm. Not because he accepted death, but because he'd already decided not to die a liar. They shoved him to his knees before the statue of the Seven. The High Septon mumbled a prayer he didn't care to understand. Then Joffrey stepped forward, voice cracking with the thrill of power. Lord Eddard Stark, he announced, you are charged with treason against the crown. You conspired to steal the throne from your rightful king. Me, the crowd booed. Rotten vegetables were already in hand. The noose hung nearby. Confess your crimes, Joffrey demanded, and I may grant you mercy. Cersei's face twitched. She hadn't planned for this moment to go off script. Her deal with Ned had been clear. Confess, call Joffrey king, save his daughters, live in exile, but that wasn't the man who rose slowly to his feet. Ned looked out across the city. He saw faces twisted with hatred, faces that once cheered for Robert, faces that had no idea they were watching a Targaryen, not a Stark. He turned toward his daughter, Sansa, her knuckles white. Then he looked straight at Cersei, and finally at Joffrey. My name, he said clearly, is Eddard Targaryen. Born of Aerys of House Targaryen, raised by Rickard Stark of Winterfell. I have lived a lie to keep peace. But peace built on lies is not peace at all. The crowd froze. No one moved. No one breathed. Ned kept going. Joffrey Baratheon is no rightful king. He is the product of incest and treason. The throne belongs to the blood of the dragon. The first rock struck him in the ribs. The next hit his cheek. But still, he didn't stop. Jon Snow is no bastard. He is Aegon Targaryen, son of Prince Rhaegar and my sister Lyanna Stark, the true heir to the Iron Throne." The roar of the crowd turned into chaos, screaming, shouting. Half didn't understand what he meant. The other half didn't want to. Cersei's face was stone. Joffrey turned purple with rage. "Kill him!" the boy king shrieked. "Cut off his head!" The gold cloaks hesitated. Even Sir Ilyn Payne, silent and soulless, paused, because the words had changed everything. Ned was no longer just a traitor. He was a dragon, a king's son, and that made his death politics, not punishment. And politics could start wars. But Joffrey didn't care. He screamed again, "Do it!" Then a sound broke through the crowd. Not a scream, not a shout, a roar, far off, deep. Like the sky itself groaned with heat. People froze, some dropped to their knees, others turned to the sky, and there, breaking through the clouds, above King's Landing came a shadow, wings wide as rooftops, fire in its belly, a dragon. The dragon tore the sky in half. People screamed. Nobles scattered like rats. Soldiers dropped their spears. The Sept of Baelor, once the heart of faith in King's Landing, became a temple of fear. The beast descended with a sound like thunder, cracking open stone, its wings sending gusts through the square, toppling banners, shaking the very bones of the city. Smoke trailed from its nostrils. Its scales were black as midnight, edged with gold, and on its back rode a girl, white hair whipped by the wind, eyes of molten violet, dressed in crimson and silver, Daenerys Targaryen. She did not land softly. The dragon slammed into the steps before the sept, the stones splitting beneath its claws. Heat rolled from its body like a living forge. The front line of gold cloaks stumbled back, shields trembling in their hands. Joffrey stood frozen, his crown tilted slightly, mouth open, trying to scream, but too stunned to remember how. Cersei's face lost all color, and Ned watched with eyes wide, not in fear, but in recognition. The blood had answered. Daenerys dismounted in one fluid motion. She moved through the chaos with fire in her eyes, flanked by Unsullied, who had appeared from alleys, sewers, the shadows of the crowd, silent and deadly. Varys, somewhere in the swarm, had made his move. This wasn't a rescue, this was a reclamation. "I am Daenerys Stormborn of House Targaryen," she said, her voice carrying above the madness. "First of my name, Queen of the Andals, the Rhoynar, and the First Men, rightful heir to the Iron Throne, and I do not come alone." She turned toward Ned, still standing despite the shackles, her eyes locked with his, and she paused. "I know who you are," she said softer. "My cousin, the last son of the dragon, hidden by wolves." The crowd couldn't keep up. They were still trying to decide whether to run or bow. Then the dragon roared again. Smoke coiled up the sept's white marble walls. Bells cracked, windows shattered, and suddenly the truth wasn't just words anymore. It was fire. The gold cloaks tried to regroup. A few brave or foolish men raised blades. The dragon answered with flame. A single breath lit up the steps, like a funeral pyre. Screams pierced the air as men turned to ash in seconds. Joffrey ran. Cersei did not. She stood, trembling, lips pressed together like stone, trying not to break. She had ruled through fear her whole life, and now she stood before a creature that had never known fear. Daenerys didn't look at her again. She walked to Ned, her boots cracking on scorched stone. He dropped to his knees, not because of the guards, because of what she was, what they were. "I didn't protect you," Ned said quietly. "I didn't protect any of you." "You survived," she replied. "You endured. That's more than most of our bloodline ever did." She reached out and touched the chains. The metal hissed and melted. The dragon had passed its judgment, free. Again Ned stood tall. The crowd watched in stunned silence as two Targaryens, one raised in snow, the other born in flame, stood side by side on the ashes of the lie. Then Ned looked toward the gate. Another rider approached, dust rising in their wake. Jon Snow, he wore black, his cloak tattered from the wall, ghost by his side. But his eyes, they weren't a bastard's eyes anymore. Daenerys saw him and stopped breathing. Ned stepped forward, unsure, unsteady. The dragon lowered its head, calm. Jon dismounted slowly. He looked at them both, his face unreadable. Then he looked at Ned. "You knew," Jon said. Ned nodded. "Too long." Jon didn't shout, didn't rage. He just looked up toward the throne high in the distance. "What now?" he asked. Daenerys spoke softly, but her words carried. "Now we stop ruling with lies." Ned turned toward the sept. "Now." Cracked and scorched. He looked at the people, terrified, silent, confused. "Now," he said, "we tell the realm the truth." And so it began. Not with peace, not yet, but with fire and truth, and dragons flying over the city that once burned. Them, because Ned Stark had finally stopped being silent, and the realm would never be the same.